This talk will focus on one specific area in southwest China to try and show the diversity of plants that can be found as the year progresses from spring through summer to autumn. Even in one just relatively small part of southwest China, there's too much to squeeze into half an hour, so I've broken this into two parts. This first part will take us from spring into summer, and the second will progress from summer into autumn. The Yangtze River takes quite a tour around Yunnan and Sichuan after it first runs down from the Tibetan Plateau. Actually, the branch of the Yangtze is more properly called the Jinsha Jiang, where Jiang means river. Later it joins the Minjiang at Yibin in Sichuan to form the main Yangtze River, as is well known. The area of interest for this article is circumscribed by the Jinsha Jiang travelling south from the Tibetan Plateau, then turning round through almost 180 degrees to the south of this picture, that's behind us, at Shigu Stone Drum, before passing through the famous Tiger Leaping Gorge, which is just to the north of this photograph, and on the east side of the Yulong Shui Shan, the Jade Dragon Snow Mountains that you can see in the background here. Over towards the east of the area is a plateau of around 3,200 metres. That's a rich pastoral and arable area for Tibetan communities. The plateau itself has a very rich natural history, but by climbing up into some of the surrounding hills, you soon get into zones with plants that resonate well with the interests of the Alpine Garden Society. The focal point of the talk is the town of Shangri-La, as it is now known as here. It's in the northwest corner of Yunnan, heading up to the mountains circumscribing the Tibetan Plateau. The area within the first loop of the Minjiang clearly demarcates the area of interest. In fact, we'll mostly be interested in the area around or centred on Shangri-La, although with a brief excursion towards Dechin further north, which will take us over the Yangtze-Mekong divide. An expressway now makes the travelling faster, but back in the 1990s, the route up from just south of Tiger Leaping Gorge, which we were just looking at, was a quiet road with plenty of stopping places to explore the mixed forest as you climbed up towards the plateau. It follows the rapidly tumbling Chongjian through a very rich deciduous tree and shrub-lined gorge, as you can see. Primula forestii can be found in the higher reaches, not too far as the crow flies from its type location, just to the east of the Yulong Shui Shan, on the other side of the mountains we just saw. Pleione bulbocoideoides is quite widespread through southeast Tibet to central and south China. It's found in these higher reaches of the river, growing on a steep bank in dappled shade in moist, mossy soil. It's best to keep it under glass through the winter, although given the plants around it, it should be possible to find a form that is fully hardy, at least in the more southerly parts of Britain. Primula chungensis, for example, is as hardy as any of the candelabras, and in my eyes at least a little more elegant. Unfortunately, it's rather short-lived in cultivation, as here it likes a moist but not a boggy soil, so perhaps slightly less boggy than some of the more robust candelabras. This is May, so up on the plateau, the dwarf rhododendrons are in full flower. Rhododendrons hypophoioides, which is blue, and racemosum, which is shades of pink to white, provide a more robust equivalent to heather moorland, very extensive here. Dwarf rhododendrons can prove useful as structural plants for a rock garden, of course. There are some good forms of these too in cultivation, so have a good search before you choose. Poorer forms can be a bit straggly. Given the altitude, they are very hardy and can tolerate full sun. Although reasonably drought tolerant, don't rely on this, and it is safest to ensure they're well watered during the summer, otherwise you might find a terminal collapse of a much loved plant. The main town used to be called Zhongdian, that's Zhongdian, with the ZH pronounced a little bit more like a DJ. That's not a pop record player, but a letters DJ, Zhongdian. I have to say I'm not the person to learn Mandarin pronunciation from. My daughter can do a very embarrassing impersonation of my bad Chinese pronunciation. Back in 1994, it was primarily a Tibetan market town with a single rather muddy main street and only 2 or 3 hotels. If you look at Google Maps now, you'll see that the main town is now very much expanded, and as we've seen, with the name changed to Shangri-La. This is all to promote the tourist interest of the Songzan Lin Tibetan monastery and the wildlife areas of Napa High, which we'll see in a moment, and other scenic hotspots. The name Shangri-La doesn't really have any relevance to the area. Although James Hilton, the author of Lost Horizon, was a keen mountaineer, he hadn't travelled to Tibet before he wrote the book and seemed to be primarily influenced by the writings of Joseph Rock and others in his work of pure imagination. So there are several locations that claim Shangri-La, and this is merely a presentation on this. Has no historical relevance at all. Although much expanded, few Tibetans now live in the town. But the old Tibetan lifestyle still survives outside it, as does the stunning natural history. So we'll continue to use the name Zhongdian to refer to the plateau, which is perhaps better referred to as a basin, as it is surrounded by mountains, rather, as you can see, rather like a karst polgi. Good views of Napa High itself, high obviously meaning lake, it can be obtained from about 10 kilometers to the northeast of the town, looking back towards the Yulong Shui Shan. It's a seasonal lake, perhaps best known for the very rare black-necked cranes, but it also has visits from many other migratory birds. It's starting to dry out in May, but provides rich grazing land for the Tibetan families' stock during the summer, as well as again you can see cereal crops being grown, fodder crops being grown and dried out. You can just see towards the left-hand side some racks which will be used for drying the crops. Plants with yellow flowers or bracts seem to be favoured on the drier slopes of all the plateau. Daphnes aurantiaca and calcicula are likely to be under discussion for a while yet. Q's Plants of the World Online only recognise calcicula as a synonym for aurantiaca, but the plants here above Napa High are clearly more compact, a character that is maintained in cultivation. So the distinction of the plants growing here as Daphne calcicula clearly has horticultural merit at the very least, and it's the one that's maintained in the at least the first volume, first edition of Christopher Gray Wilson and Philip Cribb's Guide to the Flowers of Western China. Stellar Okame is also in the Daphne family, so somewhat related, and with golden flowers again. It's a widespread, in this case a herbaceous perennial, with the golden flowered form distinguished as var chrysantha. And as a final yellow dominating, it's not yellow flowered, yellow dominated plant, Euphorbia wallichii, offers a clump forming well-structured perennial with, in this case, strong yellow bracts, flowers typical euphorb sort of yellowy greeny colour. The road starts to climb up higher out of the plateau after Napa High, stopping at about 3,500 metres and walking up a further 200 metres or so takes one through regenerating woodland. In more open areas and seemingly not liked by grazing animals is a plant that will be familiar to many, often referred to as Primula cyanopurpurea, but more correctly, as we'll see, is a subspecies. It's indeed a robust plant of the wetter mountains of southwest China and clearly enjoys the fertility of well-grazed soil. This typically is where one sees it, in open, well-grazed soil, well-manured soil. Although it's often referred to as a species, as I said, in its own right, it differs from what was formerly Primula cyanantha only by the purple flower colour, compared with the white of what is more properly referred to now as Primula cyanantha, subspecies cyanantha, the nominate form. And you'll find colonies of both easily throughout the region. So the main reason for wanting to mark these as subspecies is that they do grow together, and from at least the geographic perspective, very hard to justify separating them as distinct species. Two slightly larger rhododendrons with good garden value are Rhododendrons unionense and Roxianum. Obviously too big for a rock garden, but they do make good background plants without being dominating. Rhododendron unionense, it's a lovely plant. It's semi-evergreen with fragrant flowers ranging from white to pink or light purple. Peter Cox places it in his larger rhododendrons book, and it will eventually grow to over 3 metres if left unconstrained. However, a good form such as openwood, which has an AGM, makes a beautiful shrub of about 1.5 to 2 metres high after 10 years or so. Rhododendron Roxianum is in the smaller rhododendron book and makes a well-formed dome-covered dome covered in pink and white flowers. It's almost as attractive out of flower as it is in flower. It is quite a variable plant, as with Rhododendron unionense, but Var Orionastes has a well-deserved AGM, and it certainly won't disappoint you if you like the plants growing here, and it's probably the variety that is most widely, and rightly so, available in nursery trade. Going up a little bit higher on the crest of the ridge at around 3,700 metres, or just a little bit higher, some choice plants were also emerging in May. The annual gentians are a feature of spring and early summer. They're much smaller little jewels than the autumn gentians, which we'll see in part 2, but certainly a great pleasure, and this is a rather fine one. They are a real challenge to grow in southeast of England, so I'm a bit nervous about committing, as always, to identifications, but I believe this is Gentiana chungtianensis. Close by, this little viola looks to me rather special, but it is indeed special, of course, but it's widespread around the Northern Hemisphere. Many will have seen it. The distinguishing feature in this particular case is the other very hairy leaves, and they're These plants typically, given the distinction of our hirsuta, obviously, from its hirsute qualities, tiny little plants, so it's about 3 centimeters from top to bottom, that is, from the ground up to the top of the flower. So it is a modest little thing. Final plant on this ridge is Corydalis pachycentra. The azure flowers do have a very striking colour, but the typically rather congested raceme perhaps impacts a little on the overall effect to the human eye. It is a matter of personal choice, but it is what it is, and it is a very lovely little plant. There's another lake called Beta High, about 20 kilometres due east of Shangri-La. We'll spend more time there in the autumn, but the marshy meadows leading up to it are full of promise. At this time of year in May, Primula fasciculata can be found quite widely in the damp areas. It's a low tufted perennial. Little difficult to get a sense of scale from the picture, but the tufts are about 4 centimeters high, again from ground up to the top of the corolla. And with the corolla only being just over 1 centimeter across. So yes, don't be deceived about it. It is a very modest little plant, but very lovely nevertheless. As we move into summer, the plants of interest are generally on higher ground, at least interest from an alpine gardening perspective, or an alpine enthusiast perspective. The lavender blue rhododendron hippophaeoides is in full flower at 4,000 meters in mid-June around Tianchi here. This is up in the hills to the southwest of Shaozhongdian. That's Little Zhongdian, still marked with its name unchanged on the map, but of course the context is now missing. The much larger rhododendron decorum was banked up close to one edge of the Tianchi, which translates as celestial waters, and very appropriate it is too. Treasures more appropriate perhaps for alpine garden enthusiasts, certainly compared with rhododendron decorum, which is, as you can see, a substantial plant. The treasures for alpine enthusiasts tend to be at this time of year on slightly drier ground. Lilium sulei here looks in size, form and colour. Again, what are we talking about 10 centimetres from top to bottom. It is a modest little plant. Looks in size, form and colour as though it ought to be a fritillary. Indeed, it was originally placed there and then moved via pneumocorists to Lilium in 1950. It's a charming plant, very occasionally available, and certainly a challenge to grow. So obtaining seed raised plants is really tricky, but there is at least one nursery in the UK which does occasionally offer it. Norbocaris aperta is much easier to spot. Lilium sulei takes a little bit of hunting around because it's low to the ground, it's tucked away. The colours don't shout themselves out. But the formerly Pneumocoris tends to grow in moist, slightly shaded areas with the pink and spotted saucer-shaped flowers, almost shouting, "Look at me." Pneumocoris has been under much discussion as a genus since its recognition by France in 1889. A number of molecular studies over the last 25 years or so have resolved it as nesting into Lilium, and in a 2016 article in Phytotaxa, proposed the transfer of all 8 species to Lilium. So Lilium apertum is now the denomination accepted by Q's Plants of the World Online, and in the current September edition of the plant review from the RHS, the name was recognised there as well. So that's where we are at the moment, at least with this plant. We'll come back to Tianqi in the autumn, but there's a little more to see from summer plants before then. Part 2 will continue with some more of the summer plants and then move into autumn. In the interests of time, I'll save all my acknowledgements and apologies until the end of part 2. So hopefully look forward to that. Thank you.